She only had $30 for her twins' birthday. The billionaire CEO, silently watching at the next table, was the man who abandoned her, but was too shocked to talk. Imagine counting crumpled dollar bills in your wallet, praying you have enough to give your children a birthday worth remembering, only to look up and see the man who abandoned you, the father who never knew his children existed, watching silently from across the room, his eyes filled with shock and recognition. "Mama, are these really all for us?" The small boy's eyes widened at the two modest cupcakes, a single candle flickering in each one. "Yes, my loves. Happy birthday." The mother's voice broke slightly as she watched her twins' faces light up with joy over such a simple pleasure, a joy their father had never witnessed in the 6 years since he'd walked away. Across the cafe, a man in an expensive suit gripped his coffee cup so tightly his knuckles turned white. The children had his eyes, his smile, his dimple when they laughed. "Sir, are you feeling unwell?" The waitress's concerned voice barely registered. "Those children," he whispered, unable to tear his gaze away. "How old are they today?" "The twins? They turn 6. Every year on this day. Their mama saves all year to bring them here for birthday cupcakes. Breaks my heart how she stretches every dollar for those boys." 6 years. Exactly 9 months after he'd been told the woman he loved had taken money to disappear from his life forever. The same woman who was now watching their children he never knew existed, blow out birthday candles just 20 feet away. Stay with me to discover what happens when 6 years of secrets, lies, and misunderstandings collide in an unexpected reunion that will change for lives forever. Thea Winters stood outside Sweet Cake's cafe, counting the worn bills in her wallet for the 3rd time. $28.73. It would have to be enough. The early autumn wind tugged at her practical ponytail as she tucked the money back into her purse and plastered on a bright smile for her boys. Behind her, identical faces peered eagerly through the cafe's window display at the colorful cupcakes and pastries inside. "Remember the plan," she said, kneeling down to straighten 6-year-old Rowan's slightly crooked glasses. "1 cupcake each, a hot chocolate to share, and maybe, if you're both very good, a cookie to take home for after dinner." "Can we get the ones with the blue sprinkles?" Finn asked, bouncing slightly on his toes, always the more energetic of the pair. "Blue is our special birthday color this year." "We'll see what they have, sweetheart." Thea smoothed his perpetually messy hair, so like his father's in its stubborn refusal to stay neat. The thought came unbidden, as it always did on their birthday, and she pushed it away just as quickly. 6 years of birthdays without him. 6 years of being both mother and father. 6 years of stretching every penny while working 2 jobs to give these precious boys everything they needed, if not everything they deserved. "Ready for your special birthday adventure?" she asked, standing and taking each small hand in hers. "Ready," they chorused, their excitement palpable. As Thea reached for the door, a sleek black Bentley pulled up to the curb. She barely registered it. Luxury vehicles weren't uncommon in this upscale part of town, though she and the boys rarely ventured here except for these special occasions. Sweet Cake's cafe was expensive, but they made the most delicious cupcakes in the city, and once a year, her boys deserved the very best she could give them. Inside, the cafe was warm and fragrant with the scent of vanilla and cinnamon. Despite the modest surroundings, it felt like luxury to Thea, who was more accustomed to the fluorescent lighting of discount grocery stores and the bargain clothing outlets where she bought the twins' clothes. "Welcome back, Thea," called Margot, the cafe's owner, from behind the counter. The older woman's face creased into a genuine smile at the sight of the twins. "And happy birthday to my favorite young man. 6 years old today, isn't it?" "Yes, ma'am," Rowan answered politely while Finn nodded enthusiastically. "We're in 1st grade now." "Such big boys," Margot said warmly. "I bet you're here for your special birthday cupcakes?" "With blue sprinkles, please," Finn added hopefully. "If you have them." "Blue sprinkles coming right up." Margot winked at Thea. "The usual table by the window is open." Thea guided the boys to their spot, a small table with a view of the park across the street. It was their tradition, this once-a-year visit to Sweet Cake's. No matter how tight money was, she made sure they had this one special experience on their birthday. The rest of the year might be filled with homemade treats and careful budgeting, but today was different. Today was for making memories. "Can we get hot chocolate too, Mama?" Rowan asked, his serious eyes, so like his father's, looking up at her hopefully. It's cold outside. Thea mentally recalculated her budget. The cupcakes were $5 each, which already took up a third of what she'd brought. A hot chocolate to share would be another $4.50. That would leave just enough for a cookie each to take home, with a few dollars for a tip for kind Margot. One to share, she said with a decisive nod. Birthday boys should have something warm and special. The bell above the cafe door chimed as it opened again. Thea glanced up automatically, then quickly away as a tall man in an expensive charcoal suit entered. Something about his confident stride tugged at her memory, but she dismissed it. Men in expensive suits were not part of her world anymore. "What kind of cupcakes do you think they'll have today?" she asked the twins, focusing on their excitement rather than the strange hollow feeling in her chest. As the boys debated the merits of chocolate versus vanilla, Thea felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. She turned slightly, glancing toward the counter where the suited man was placing an order. For a brief moment, she caught his profile as he turned to survey the cafe. The world seemed to stop. No, it couldn't be. After all this time, it couldn't be him. But it was. Everett Carter, CEO of Nexus Technologies. The man whose family had paid her to disappear 6 years ago when she tried to tell him about the pregnancy. The man who had never answered her calls or letters. The father of her children, who had chosen his inheritance and family business over her and the babies she'd been carrying. Thea's heart hammered in her chest as she quickly turned away, hoping he hadn't noticed her. What was he doing here, in this cafe, today of all days? She resisted the urge to gather the boys and flee. This was their special birthday tradition. She wouldn't let him ruin it, especially when he'd shown so clearly that he wanted nothing to do with them. "Mama, are you okay?" Rowan's perceptive eyes had caught her momentary panic. "You look funny." "I'm fine, sweetheart," she lied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about how grown-up you both are now." 6 years old. That's practically grown-up, Finn agreed seriously. "Dylan in our class is still 5. He's practically a baby." Thea laughed despite her anxiety, grateful for the distraction of her son's earnest declaration. "Well, you're certainly very mature young men." Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Everett take a seat at a table across the cafe. He hadn't noticed her yet, too absorbed in his phone as he sat down. If she was lucky, they could finish their celebration and leave before he ever realized who was sitting across the room. Margot approached their table with a tray, her kind face beaming. "Here we go. 2 birthday cupcakes with extra blue sprinkles, 1 hot chocolate with 2 straws, and," she winked at Thea, "a little birthday surprise." The surprise was a small plate with 2 heart-shaped cookies, each delicately iced with the boys' initials. Thea's eyes filled with grateful tears. Margot had been doing this since the twins' 2nd birthday, always adding something extra without charging her for it. "Margot, you shouldn't have." "Nonsense," the older woman interrupted firmly. "It's not every day my favorite customers turn 6. Consider it my birthday gift to these handsome young men." "Thank you, Miss Margot," the twins chorused, their eyes wide with delight at the unexpected treat. "You're very welcome. Now shall we sing?" Before Thea could protest, Margot began a cheerful rendition of Happy Birthday, loud enough that several other customers joined in. Thea sang along, trying to ignore the sensation of eyes on her back, trying to focus only on her sons' glowing faces as they waited to blow out their candles. "Make a wish," she whispered as the song ended. The boys exchanged a look, that twin communication that never ceased to amaze her, and then leaned forward together, eyes closed in concentration before blowing out their candles in perfect synchrony. "What did you wish for?" Thea asked, though she already suspected the answer. It was the same every year. Finn glanced at Rowan, who nodded slightly, permission to speak for them both, as usual. "We wish to meet our dad," Finn said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Just to see what he's like. Even just once." Thea's heart constricted painfully in her chest. "Oh, my loves. We know wishes don't always come true," Rowan added quickly, ever the practical one. "But Miss Jenkins says it's good to keep hoping for important things." "Miss Jenkins is very wise," Thea managed, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Sometimes wishes take time. And sometimes—" She paused, searching for words that wouldn't crush their innocent hope, but wouldn't build false expectations either. Sometimes life gives us different gifts than the ones we wish for. Like how we got you instead of a dad and a mom. Finn asked, tilting his head curiously. Yes, exactly like that. Thea smiled, blinking back tears. Now, these cupcakes won't eat themselves. Let's see if they're as delicious as they look. As the boys eagerly dug into their treats, Thea allowed herself one quick glance across the cafe. Her breath caught in her throat. Everett was staring directly at their table, his coffee untouched before him, his face pale with shock. Their eyes met for the briefest moment before she looked away, heart racing. He had seen the twins. There was no mistaking the resemblance. Both boys had his eyes, his strong jawline. Finn even had the same cowlick that had always made Everett's hair stand up in the morning. Anyone who knew him would see it immediately. Did he recognize her? Did he realize who these children were? And most importantly, what would he do about it? Everett Carter had been having a perfectly ordinary day until the moment his world tilted on its axis. He'd stopped at Sweet Cake's Cafe on a whim, needing caffeine before his next meeting and tired of his usual corporate coffee shop. The quaint cafe had good reviews, and his assistant had mentioned their exceptional pastries. He hadn't expected to walk in and find his past waiting for him. At first, he hadn't noticed her, the woman with her back to him, sitting with two small boys at a window table. It was only when the cafe owner started singing "Happy Birthday" that he looked up from his phone, his attention caught by the childish excitement at the celebration. That was when he saw them. Twin boys, around 5 or 6 years old, with dark hair and familiar eyes, his eyes staring with delight at the cupcakes before them. And then, as the woman turned slightly to join in the singing, he saw her profile. Thea Winters, the woman he'd loved. The woman who had disappeared from his life 6 years ago after taking his mother's money to stay away from him. Or so he'd been told. 6 years. Twin boys. The timing couldn't be coincidence. Everett felt as though he'd been struck. His coffee sat forgotten as he stared, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Thea looked different. Thinner, her once luxurious hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, dressed in practical clothes rather than the stylish outfits she'd favored when they were together. But it was unmistakably her. And those boys were unmistakably his. He watched, frozen in place, as the children blew out their candles. His children. His sons. Sons he never knew existed. Sons who were celebrating their birthday with what appeared to be a very modest celebration, just cupcakes and a shared drink, while he sat across the room with a wallet full of credit cards and more money than he could spend in a lifetime. When Thea glanced in his direction, their eyes met briefly. Recognition, fear, and defiance flashed across her face before she looked away. She knew he was there. She knew he'd seen them. The cafe owner, Margot, he'd heard Thea call her, approached his table with a concerned expression. "Sir, your coffee's getting cold. Are you feeling unwell?" Everett cleared his throat, struggling to find his voice. "Those children," he said quietly, nodding toward the twins' table. "How old are they today?" Margot glanced over her shoulder with a fond smile. "The twins? They turn 6 every year on this day. Their mama saves all year to bring them here for birthday cupcakes." She shook her head slightly. "Breaks my heart how she stretches every dollar for those boys." "She comes here often?" Everett asked, trying to keep his voice casual while his mind raced with calculations. "Just once a year, for their birthday. Been coming since they were 2. Margot studied him curiously. "Do you know them?" I used to know their mother. A long time ago. 6 years ago, to be precise. 9 months before those boys were born. Small world, Margot commented. Thea's one of the good ones. Raising those boys all on her own, working 2 jobs. Never complains, though it can't be easy. 2 jobs. Raising his sons alone. While he'd been building his empire, believing she'd taken a payoff to leave him, Thea had been struggling to support their children. Children he knew nothing about. "Excuse me," Everett said abruptly, placing a $50 bill on the table. "Keep the change." He stood, intending to approach their table, to demand answers, to see his sons up close. But as he took a step in their direction, he faltered. What would he say? What right did he have to interrupt their celebration? And what if he was wrong? What if there was another explanation? No, there was no other explanation. The timing aligned perfectly with their breakup. The boys had his features, his expressions. Even the way the more serious one adjusted his glasses reminded Everett of himself as a child. These were his sons. and Thea had kept them from him. Or had she? Memories surfaced, Thea's increasingly urgent messages in the weeks after they'd broken up. Messages his mother had intercepted, claiming they were just attempts to reconcile. Messages he'd never returned because he believed Thea had taken money to walk away from him. What if she had tried to tell him? What if his mother's version of events wasn't the truth? Everett sank back into his chair, watching as the small family enjoyed their modest celebration. The boys were clearly well cared for, despite what appeared to be limited means. They were polite, animated, happy. Thea had done well by them, even without his support or knowledge. But why hadn't she told him? Why keep his own children a secret? The answer came with sickening clarity. Because she believed he didn't want them. Because from her perspective, he had ignored her attempts to contact him, had let his family pay her off, had chosen his inheritance over her. Of course, she wouldn't have expected him to want children when he'd apparently rejected her so completely. Except he hadn't. He'd been told she rejected him, that she'd taken the money and disappeared willingly. Another lie in what was apparently a web of deception spanning years. Across the cafe, one of the twins, the more energetic one without glasses, was animatedly describing something, his hands moving expressively as he spoke. His brother watched with a patient expression that seemed impossibly mature for a child his age. Both of them looked at Thea with adoration, and she returned their gaze with such love that Everett felt like an intruder just watching them. He had missed everything. First words, first steps, first days of school, 6 birthdays, all because of lies and misunderstandings that had kept him from even knowing they existed. As he watched, Thea carefully counted out money from a worn wallet to pay their bill. The careful way she handled each bill, the mental calculation visible on her face, it told him everything about her financial situation. His sons were celebrating their birthday with cupcakes that probably represented a significant expense for their mother, while he had more money than he could spend in a lifetime. The injustice of it burned in his chest. Everett made a decision. He wouldn't approach them today. He wouldn't ruin the boy's birthday with what would inevitably be a difficult confrontation. But he would find out the truth. All of it. And then he would find a way to be part of his sons' lives, whatever it took. As Thea and the twins prepared to leave, he strategically checked his phone, keeping his face turned away. He wasn't ready for a direct confrontation. Not yet. Not until he had answers. "Thank you for my special birthday, Mama," one of the twins was saying as they passed his table. "It was the best one ever." "Mine too," the other agreed. "Can we come back when we're 7? "We'll see, my loves," Thea answered. Her voice warmed despite the tension Everett could see in her shoulders. She knew he was still there. She was hurrying them past, keeping herself between the boys and him, like a protective shield. The bell chimed as they left the cafe. Through the window, Everett watched them walk down the street, his unknown family, until they turned a corner and disappeared from view. Only then did he pull out his phone and make a call. "Jackson," he said when his head of security answered, "I need you to find someone for me." Immediately. 6 years earlier, Thea had stood in the elegant foyer of the Carter mansion, her hands shaking as she faced Victoria Carter's cold stare. She had come to tell Everett about the pregnancy test she'd taken that morning, 2 pink lines that had changed everything. But instead of finding her boyfriend, she had found his mother, imperious and unwelcoming as always. "Everett isn't available," Victoria had said, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the marble side table. "But perhaps it's for the best. We need to have a conversation, you and I. I really need to speak with him," Thea had insisted, one hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach. "It's important." "I'm sure it is." Victoria's smile hadn't reached her eyes. "Let me guess, you found yourself in an interesting condition and you're hoping my son will ride to the rescue? How convenient, just as the board is considering him for CEO. Thea had stared at the older woman in shock. "How did you?" "Please. I wasn't born yesterday. Girls like you see men like my son as a meal ticket. But let me be clear. There will be no hasty marriage, no scandal, no Winter's girl inserting herself into the Carter legacy. That's not why I'm here," Thea had protested, anger replacing her initial shock. "I love Everett, and he deserves to know about his child. What he deserves is the future he's worked for, the future generations of Carters have built, not to be trapped by an unplanned pregnancy with a girl from the wrong side of town." Victoria had opened a drawer and removed an envelope, sliding it across the table toward Thea. Inside is a check for $1 million. Take it, disappear, and handle your little problem discreetly. In return, you'll never contact my son again. You think I want your money? Thea had been incredulous. I came here to tell Everett he's going to be a father, not to blackmail your family. Call it whatever you like. The offer stands, a comfortable future for you, and freedom for my son to fulfill his potential. Victoria's expression had hardened. Refuse, and I'll ensure you regret it. Everett is about to sign a new trust agreement that includes a morality clause. Any scandal, like an unexpected pregnancy with a cocktail waitress, would cost him his inheritance and his position in the company. I'm not a cocktail waitress, Thea had said reflexively. I'm finishing my degree. Semantics. The point remains, your presence in his life now would destroy everything he's worked for. Is that what you want? To ruin him because of your carelessness? Thea had felt like she was drowning. I need to speak to Everett. Let him make his own decision. He already has, Victoria had said smoothly. Why do you think he's not here to meet you? He knows about your little visit today. He asked me to handle it. She had gestured to the envelope. This was his idea. A clean break, no messy entanglements. The lie had been so convincing, delivered with such cold certainty, that Thea had felt her world collapse. He knows? He sent you two to pay me off. He's a Carter. Business comes first, always. Surely you understood that about him. Thea had left the envelope untouched, walking out with as much dignity as she could muster. She had tried calling Everett afterward, desperate to hear the truth from him directly. Her calls went unanswered, her messages unreturned. Even her letter, sent to his office, had received no response. In her devastation, she had believed Victoria's lie, that Everett had chosen his family legacy over her and their unborn child. And when the ultrasound revealed twins, she had made her decision. She would raise these children alone, without the support of a man who could so callously reject them before they were even born. Now, 6 years later, as she walked her sons home from their birthday celebration, Thea's mind raced with the implications of seeing Everett again. He had recognized her, she was sure of it, and he had seen the twins, whose resemblance to him was undeniable. What would he do? Would he confront her? Try to claim the children he had rejected? Or would he simply disappear again, returning to his world of wealth and privilege, leaving them in their modest existence? Mama, can we play at the park? Finn asked, tugging at her hand as they passed the small playground near their apartment. Thea checked her watch. There was just enough time before she needed to prepare dinner and then head to her evening shift at the hospital, where she worked as a unit secretary. 20 minutes, she agreed. But then we need to go home so I can get ready for work. As the boys raced toward the swings, their earlier wishes about their absent father seemingly forgotten in the joy of playground time, Thea sat on a bench and allowed herself a moment of panic. Seeing Everett had reopened wounds she thought had long since healed. The shock on his face had seemed genuine, as if he truly hadn't known about the twins. But that was impossible. She had tried to tell him. Had his mother intercepted her messages? Had the letter never reached him? No, that was wishful thinking. The simpler explanation was that he had known and chosen to stay away. The Carter family business and fortune had always been his priority. She had been naive to think their relationship would be different. Higher, Mama, watch me go higher. Finn called from the swings, his face alight with joy. Be careful, she cautioned automatically, pushing aside her worries to focus on her son's happiness. Whatever happened with Everett, these boys were her world. She had built a life for them, modest but stable, filled with love, if not luxury. Nothing and no one would threaten that, not even the billionaire CEO who had fathered them. Later that evening, after the boys were asleep and Thea had changed into her hospital scrubs, her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Abernathy, their elderly neighbor who watched the twins during her evening shifts. Boys fast asleep. Birthday excitement wore them out. Don't worry about a thing. See you at midnight. Thea smiled gratefully. Mrs. Abernathy had been a godsend since the twins were babies, a grandmother figure who charged far less than conventional childcare and genuinely loved the boys. Another piece of the patchwork support system Thea had carefully constructed over the years. As she hurried toward the bus stop, Thea couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Seeing Everett had disrupted the careful balance of her life, introducing an element of uncertainty she hadn't felt since those early days of pregnancy, when she'd been alone and terrified of the future. Whatever happened, She would protect her sons, even from their father, if necessary, especially from their father. While Thea began her evening shift at St. Mary's Hospital, Everett Carter sat in his penthouse office, surrounded by the information his security team had compiled in just a few hours. The file on Thea Winters was comprehensive. Current address in a modest apartment complex across town. Employment history showing 2 current jobs. Unit secretary at St. Mary's Hospital by night. Administrative assistant at Westlake Community College by day. And most importantly, birth certificates for Rowan and Finn Winters, born exactly 6 years ago today. No father listed. The birth date confirmed what he already knew in his heart. These were his sons, conceived during the final weeks of his relationship with Thea. A relationship that had ended abruptly when he'd been told she accepted money to disappear from his life. Find any record of a payment to Thea Winters 6 years ago, he instructed Jackson, who stood waiting for further orders. $1 million from either my personal accounts or any Carter family account. Sir, that would require access to your mother's financial records as well. Then access them, Everett said coldly. I want the complete picture. As Jackson left to continue his investigation, Everett studied the photos his team had obtained. Thea leaving her apartment with the twins, dressed in her hospital uniform. The boys at their small neighborhood school. Their modest apartment building, a far cry from the luxury Thea could have provided them if she'd accepted the money he'd been told she took. The evidence was mounting that he'd been lied to. Extensively. For years. His phone rang. His mother, as if summoned by his thoughts. Everett stared at the screen for a moment before declining the call. He wasn't ready for that confrontation. Not until he had all the facts. Another photo caught his attention. Thea and the boys at what appeared to be a community center. The twins engaged in what looked like a karate class, while Thea watched from the sidelines. They were smiling, clearly thriving despite what must be significant financial constraints. She had done well by them, he had to acknowledge. Without his knowledge or support, Thea had raised 2 apparently healthy, happy boys. But at what cost to herself? The Thea he remembered had been studying architectural design, with dreams of creating sustainable housing. Had she abandoned those ambitions to support their children alone? A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Jackson returned, his expression grave. Sir, there's no record of any payment to Thea Winters from your accounts. And my mother's? There was a check written 6 years ago for $1 million, made out to Thea Winters. Jackson hesitated, but it was never cashed. The check was voided after 90 days. Everett felt the final piece click into place. His mother had offered Thea money to disappear, but Thea had never taken it. She had walked away without a penny, choosing to raise their children alone rather than accept what she must have seen as a bribe. And he had believed the worst of her, without question, for 6 years. There's more, sir, Jackson added. We found copies of emails sent to your personal account from Thea Winters in the weeks after your breakup. They were intercepted by your former assistant, Margaret Wells, who was apparently acting on your mother's instructions. The messages never reached you. Of course, Margaret had been his mother's choice for his assistant, installed just before he took over as CEO. She had left the company abruptly about a year later, with no explanation. Now he understood why. And the letter? Everett asked, remembering Thea mentioning sending one to his office when her calls went unanswered. Also intercepted. We found a copy in your mother's private files. It explicitly mentioned the pregnancy. The fury that had been building in Everett's chest threatened to explode. His mother had systematically hidden Thea's attempts to tell him about his children, then lied about Thea taking money to leave. She had robbed him of 6 years with his sons. Robbed those boys of their father. And for what? To prevent a scandal? To maintain control over the Carter legacy? Sir, what would you like us to do now? Jackson asked carefully, clearly recognizing the dangerous edge of Everett's anger. Nothing further tonight. Everett's voice was controlled, belying the rage within. I'll handle this personally from here. After Jackson left, Everett stared at the birth certificates again. Rowan James Winters and Finn Thomas Winters. His sons. They even had his middle name, James, though Thea couldn't have known it was a family name passed down through generations of Carter men. Tomorrow, he would confront Thea. Tomorrow, he would begin the process of becoming part of his sons' lives. But tonight, he needed to process the magnitude of what had been taken from him, and what he now needed to make right. The next morning found Thea at her desk at Westlake Community College, processing student registration forms with the efficiency of someone who had been doing the job for years. After her late hospital shift, she'd had barely 5 hours of sleep before needing to get the boys ready for school and herself to her day job. The exhaustion was familiar, a constant companion in her life as a single working mother. "Ms. Winters?" The department secretary appeared at her cubicle. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." Thea frowned, glancing at her calendar. She had no appointment scheduled. "Did they give a name?" "Everett Carter," the secretary said, her voice dropping to an impressed whisper. "As in Carter Technologies, Everett Carter. Says he's an old friend." Thea's blood ran cold. She had known this moment might come after yesterday's chance encounter, but she hadn't expected it so soon. Or at her workplace, where she couldn't easily escape. "I'm in the middle of registration processing," she said weakly. "Could you ask him to?" "He's very insistent," the secretary interrupted, clearly thrilled by the presence of a billionaire in their modest administrative offices. "He's waiting in the conference room. Says he won't leave until he speaks with you." Of course he wouldn't. Everett Carter had always been relentless when he wanted something. It was what made him such a successful businessman and such a dangerous adversary. "Give me 5 minutes," Thea said, desperately needing time to compose herself. In the small employee restroom, Thea splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection. She looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from years of working multiple jobs while raising children alone. Her once fashionable clothes had long since been replaced by practical, affordable options. Her hair, which Everett had once loved to run his fingers through, was pulled back in its usual practical ponytail. She wasn't the same woman he had known 6 years ago, and he certainly wasn't the same man. "You can do this," she told her reflection. "For the boys. You've faced worse." With a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders and headed to the conference room. Whatever Everett wanted, she would handle it with the same determination that had gotten her through the past 6 years. When she opened the door, Everett was standing at the window, his back to her, looking out at the community college's modest campus. He turned at the sound of her entrance, and for a moment, they simply stared at each other, two people who had once known each other intimately, now separated by years and secrets and misunderstandings. "Thea," he said finally, her name sounding strange in his voice after so long. "Thank you for seeing me." "Did I have a choice?" she responded, closing the door behind her but remaining near it, both for a quick escape and to maintain distance between them. "You've always been persuasive when you want something. We need to talk." After 6 years of silence, "Now you want to talk?" Thea crossed her arms, a defensive posture she recognized but couldn't help. "What could we possibly have to say to each other?" "You know exactly what." Everett's voice was controlled, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the slight tick that had always appeared when he was angry. "Those boys at the cafe yesterday. They're mine, aren't they?" There was no point in denial. The resemblance was too strong, the timing too perfect. "Biologically, yes. They're your sons. Sons I knew nothing about until yesterday." The words were clipped, precise, hiding what she suspected was fury beneath the surface. "Sons you kept from me for 6 years. Kept from you." Thea almost laughed, the sound harsh and disbelieving. "I tried to tell you, Everett. I called. I texted. I even sent a letter to your office when nothing else worked. You chose not to respond. I never got your messages." Everett took a step toward her, his expression intense. "Any of them. My mother intercepted everything. The calls, the texts, the letter. She told me you'd taken money to disappear from my life." Thea stared at him, processing this information. "What? $1 million, supposedly. To walk away and never contact me again." His eyes never left her face. "A check that was never cashed. Because you never took it, did you?" "Of course I didn't." The memory of that terrible day in the Carter mansion surged back. "Your mother offered me money to handle my little problem and disappear. I refused. I would never have taken money to keep your children from you. But you believed I knew? That I was behind the offer. What was I supposed to think?" Thea's composure began to crack. "Your mother said you sent her to handle it. That you knew about the pregnancy and wanted a clean break, no messy entanglements. When you never answered my calls or responded to my letter, I believed her." Understanding dawned in Everett's eyes, followed by a flash of pain quickly masked. "She lied. To both of us. I never knew about the pregnancy, Thea. Never knew I had children until I saw them yesterday. The implication of his words sank in slowly. 6 years of believing Everett had rejected his own children. 6 years of anger and hurt and struggle. All because of Victoria Carter's manipulation. Why would she do that? Thea asked, though she already knew the answer. Control. Preserving the Carter legacy on her terms. Everett's voice was bitter. I was about to sign a new trust agreement with a morality clause. An unexpected pregnancy could have threatened my inheritance, my position in the company. That's what she told me, Thea said quietly. That I would ruin everything you'd worked for. So you walked away, raised our sons alone rather than risk damaging my career. There was something like wonder in his voice. Without taking a penny of Carter money. They're my children, Thea said simply. I would do anything for them, including letting them believe their father didn't want to be part of their lives, if that was what you'd chosen. The silence that followed was heavy with 6 years of lost time, missed opportunities, unnecessary struggle. They asked about me yesterday, Everett said finally. I heard them. They wished to meet their father. Thea nodded, her throat tight. Every birthday. Same wish. I want to meet them properly, Thea. I want to be part of their lives. Everett's voice was firm, determined. I've missed 6 years. I won't miss any more. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. They are my sons. I have a right to know them, and they have a right to know me. The CEO was back, the man accustomed to getting what he wanted through sheer force of will. Thea straightened, meeting his intensity with her own. They are children, not corporate acquisitions, she said firmly. You can't just storm into their lives and take over because you've decided it's time to be a father. They don't know you. They'll need time to adjust to the idea. Time I'm prepared to give them, Everett countered. But I want to start now. Today. That's not possible. I have work until 5, and then the boys have karate, and… Cancel it. Everett's tone brooked no argument. This is more important than karate class or administrative paperwork. This is my life, Everett, Thea said, frustration rising. My carefully balanced, precariously scheduled life that keeps food on the table and a roof over my children's heads. I can't just cancel everything because you've suddenly decided to acknowledge their existence. Her words hit home. Everett stepped back, visibly reassessing his approach. You're right. I'm sorry. This is overwhelming. Finding out I have children, that I've missed so much. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Thea's heart ache despite herself. What do you suggest? How do we do this? The question caught her off guard. The Everett she remembered didn't ask for suggestions. He gave orders. This moment of humility, of recognizing her authority in their sons' lives, was unexpected. Dinner, she said after a moment's consideration. Tonight, at our apartment. The boys will be in their own environment, comfortable. I can prepare them beforehand, explain who you are. But just a short visit. An introduction, nothing more. We take this slowly, Everett. For their sake. He nodded, accepting her terms with surprising grace. What time? 7. I'll text you the address. I know where you live, he admitted, having the decency to look slightly embarrassed at her startled expression. I had my security team find you after yesterday. I needed answers. Of course he did. The man who controlled a technology empire worth billions wouldn't have waited passively for explanations. 7 o'clock, she repeated. And Everett, please don't bring presents or try to impress them with your wealth. They don't need grand gestures. They just need to know who you are. I understand. He moved toward the door, then paused. Thank you, Thea, for agreeing to this, for raising them so well. He seemed to struggle for words. For everything. After he left, Thea sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unsteady beneath her. The father of her children, the man she had once loved, the billionaire CEO she had believed rejected them, was coming to dinner. To meet his sons. To become part of their lives. Everything was about to change, and she wasn't sure if she was ready. If you're invested in what happens next, hit that like button and subscribe for the conclusion of this emotional reunion. Will Everett be able to connect with the sons he never knew existed? Can Thea forgive the years of misunderstanding? Comment below with your thoughts on whether some wounds are too deep to heal, or if this family might find their way back to each other after all. The hardest conversations are sometimes the most necessary. As Thea prepared her sons to meet their father for the first time, she realized that sometimes life gives second chances in the most unexpected ways. But can Everett Carter, billionaire CEO, Find a place in the modest life Thea has built? And what happens when the truth about Victoria Carter's deception finally comes to light? Telling 6-year-old twins that the father they'd wished for at every birthday was suddenly appearing for dinner proved to be one of the most difficult conversations of Thea's life. After picking them up from school, she sat them down in their small living room, her heart pounding as she searched for the right words. "Remember yesterday at the cafe? The man who was watching us?" she began carefully. "The one in the fancy suit?" Finn asked, always observant of details. He looked sad. Thea took a deep breath. "That man, his name is Everett Carter. And he's your father." The silence that followed felt eternal. Rowan's eyes widened behind his glasses, while Finn's mouth dropped open in shock. "Our real dad?" Rowan finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The one in the pictures?" Thea nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. But you said he couldn't be with us," Finn pointed out, confusion clear on his small face. "You said he had important work far away." "I thought that was true," Thea explained gently. "Sometimes grown-ups misunderstand each other. Your father, he didn't know about you until he saw us yesterday. He didn't know he had 2 wonderful sons." "He didn't know about us?" Rowan's analytical mind was clearly processing this new information. How could he not know? How indeed, Thea thought, struggling to find an age-appropriate explanation for Victoria Carter's manipulation. There was a mix-up. Someone kept the news from him. But now he knows, and he wants very much to meet you. He's coming for dinner tonight. Tonight. Both boys spoke in unison, their expressions a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Yes, and it's okay to feel nervous or confused. This is big news." Thea reached out to hold both their hands. "No matter what happens with your father, nothing changes between us. You two are still my whole world, and I love you more than anything." "Will he live with us now?" Finn asked, the practical question catching Thea off guard. "No, honey. He has his own home, but he wants to get to know you and be part of your lives." "Is he nice?" Rowan's question was soft, vulnerable. Thea hesitated, memories of the Everett she had known surfacing, his determination, his ambition, but also the gentleness he had sometimes shown her. "He can be very nice. And he's very smart, like both of you." "Does he like butterflies?" Finn asked, referencing his current obsession. "I don't know. You'll have to ask him yourself." Thea smiled despite her anxiety. "Now, we need to get ready. He'll be here at 7 o'clock. As the boys raced to their shared bedroom to change out of their school clothes, Thea leaned back against the couch, momentarily overwhelmed. How had her carefully constructed life changed so dramatically in just 24 hours? The father of her children, the man she had loved and lost, was stepping back into their lives. Nothing would ever be the same. The modest 2-bedroom apartment suddenly felt inadequate as she looked at it through Everett's imagined eyes. The mismatched furniture collected from thrift stores, the walls she hadn't had time to repaint, the cramped kitchen with its outdated appliances, all of it a stark contrast to the luxury Everett was accustomed to. Not that it mattered. This wasn't about impressing him. It was about creating a comfortable environment for their sons to meet their father. At precisely 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. The boys, who had been watching the clock with growing excitement and nervousness, jumped up from where they'd been playing. "Wait here," Thea instructed gently. "Let me talk to him first." When she opened the door, Everett stood in the hallway looking both commanding and uncertain, an unusual combination for a man accustomed to controlling every situation. He had changed from his business suit into more casual clothes, dark jeans, and a simple button-down shirt that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. In his hands, he held a small gift bag. "I know you said no presents," he said before she could speak, "but it's small. Something meaningful, not expensive." Thea hesitated, then nodded, stepping back to let him enter. "They're waiting in the living room. They know who you are. They're excited. And nervous. That makes 2 of us," Everett admitted, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I've closed billion-dollar deals with less anxiety than I'm feeling right now." The vulnerability in his admission surprised her. "Just be yourself. They're good at reading people." "Which version of myself?" Everett asked, and for a moment Thea glimpsed the uncertainty beneath his confident exterior. "The CEO? The son of Victoria Carter? Or the man you used to know?" "The father they deserve," Thea answered simply. She led him into the small living room where Rowan and Finn sat side by side on the worn couch, their small feet dangling above the floor. They looked up simultaneously as Everett entered, their blue eyes, his eyes, widening as they took in the man they'd only known from a few carefully selected photographs. For a moment, no one spoke. Everett stared at his sons, seemingly unable to find words, while they stared back with identical expressions of cautious curiosity. "Boys," Thea broke the silence gently. "This is your father, Everett Carter. Everett, these are your sons, Rowan and Finn." Everett moved forward slowly and knelt down to their eye level, a gesture that struck Thea as both respectful and instinctively right. "Hello," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "I'm very glad to meet you both." "I'm Rowan," said the more serious twin, adjusting his glasses in a gesture so like Everett that Thea saw the recognition flash in his eyes. "I'm 6 minutes older." "And I'm Finn," added his brother, bouncing slightly with barely contained energy. "Do you really not know about us this whole time?" Leave it to Finn to cut straight to the heart of the matter. Everett didn't flinch from the direct question. "No, I didn't," he answered honestly. "And I'm very sorry about that. If I had known, I would have been here from the beginning." "Mom said someone kept the news from you," Rowan said, his analytical mind clearly processing this information. "Was it a bad guy?" A flicker of something, pain, anger, determination, crossed Everett's face before he controlled his expression. It was someone who thought they were doing the right thing, but made a very big mistake. Like when Mrs. Peterson sent Billy to timeout, but it was actually Dylan who broke the class hamster cage? Finn asked, making a connection that only made sense in his 6-year-old logic. "Something like that," Everett agreed with a small smile, clearly charmed despite himself. "I brought something for you. Not because it's expensive or special, but because it's important to me." He offered the small gift bag, which Finn eagerly took while Rowan watched more cautiously. Inside was a small, leather-bound photo album. As the boys opened it together, Thea moved closer to see what Everett had brought. The album contained photos she had never seen before, Everett as a young boy around their age, playing with what appeared to be simple engineering toys. Everett as a teenager with a science fair project. Everett in college with his first company logo sketched on a dorm room whiteboard. "That's me when I was your age," he explained, pointing to the first photo. "I was just learning how things worked, taking apart clocks and radios, and trying to put them back together." "I do that too," Finn exclaimed, excitement overcoming his initial shyness. "Mom says I'm not allowed to take apart the microwave though." "A reasonable boundary," Everett agreed, his eyes meeting Thea's briefly over the boys' heads. "Maybe we could build something together sometime. Something new, not taking apart your mother's appliances." "Can we really?" Finn's excitement was palpable. "If your mother agrees," Everett added, showing a respect for her authority that Thea hadn't expected. "What about you?" Everett turned to Rowan, who had been quietly studying the photos. "Do you like building things too?" Rowan shook his head. "I like reading. And math. I'm the best in my class at multiplication." "That's impressive," Everett said with genuine admiration. "I love math at your age too." It made sense when a lot of other things didn't. Rowan nodded solemnly, a flicker of recognition passing between them, two analytical minds finding common ground. Exactly. The initial awkwardness gradually faded as they moved to the small dining table for dinner. Thea had prepared a simple meal, spaghetti and meatballs, the boys' favorite, and was acutely aware of the contrast between her modest home cooking and the gourmet meals Everett likely enjoyed. If he noticed, he gave no sign, accepting his plate with genuine thanks and complimenting the food without a hint of condescension. As they ate, the twins gradually grew more comfortable, peppering Everett with questions about his life, his work, his childhood. He answered each one with patience and honesty, tailoring his responses to their level of understanding without talking down to them. "Do you have a dog?" Finn asked around a mouthful of spaghetti, earning a gentle reminder from Thea about talking with his mouth full. "No," Everett replied. "My building doesn't allow pets. But I always wanted a dog when I was your age." "We want one too, but Mom says our apartment is too small," Rowan explained. "And they cost a lot of money for food and vet bills." "Very practical considerations," Everett agreed, his gaze meeting Thea's across the table. She could read his thoughts as clearly as if he'd spoken them. He could easily afford a dog, a bigger apartment, anything the boys needed. But he didn't voice this, respecting the boundaries she had established. "What's your favorite subject in school?" Everett asked, turning the conversation. Math, Rowan answered immediately. Recess, Finn said simultaneously, causing everyone to laugh. As dinner progressed, Thea observed the natural dynamic developing between Everett and the twins. Despite his initial nervousness, he seemed to have an instinctive understanding of how to relate to them, when to listen, when to share, when to simply observe. It was a side of him she had never seen before, one that made her wonder what kind of father he might have been if Victoria's deception hadn't kept them apart. After dinner, as the boys showed Everett their prized collection of rocks and feathers found in the neighborhood park, Thea cleared the dishes, her mind swirling with conflicted emotions. There was anger at the years stolen from all of them by Victoria's manipulation, but also a growing acknowledgement that perhaps this was how it was meant to unfold. Would the younger, ambition-driven Everett have been ready for fatherhood? Would she have been overshadowed by the Carter family wealth and influence in raising her sons? They're amazing, Thea. She turned to find Everett standing in the kitchen doorway, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she had rarely seen. The boys had gone to brush their teeth and put on pajamas, giving the adults a moment alone. They are, she agreed, setting down the dish she'd been washing. The best parts of both of us, somehow. You've done an incredible job with them. Their confidence, their curiosity, their kindness, that's all you. They have your intelligence, Theo acknowledged. And your determination. Especially Finn. Nothing stops that boy once he sets his mind to something. A comfortable silence fell between them. Former lovers who had created life together, now virtual strangers finding their way back to some form of connection through their children. What happens now? Thea finally asked, voicing the question that had been hanging between them all evening. That depends on what you're comfortable with, Everett replied, surprising her again with his deference to her wishes. I want to be part of their lives, Thea. Really part of it, not just occasional visits and child support payments. They need stability, consistency. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts, but someone they can count on to show up. I understand that. Everett's gaze was steady, sincere. I'm prepared to rearrange my entire life if that's what it takes. Board meetings, business trips, corporate obligations, none of it matters compared to knowing my sons. Before she could respond, the boys raced back into the room, now in their matching rocket ship pajamas. Can you read us our bedtime story? Finn asked Everett boldly. Mom always reads one chapter, but maybe tonight you could do it. Everett glanced at Thea, seeking permission. When she nodded, his expression brightened with genuine pleasure. I'd be honored. What are we reading? The Invention of Hugo Cabret, Rowan answered, already heading toward their bedroom. It's about a boy who fixes clocks and lives in a train station. Sounds fascinating, Everett said, following them. Lead the way. Thea lingered in the kitchen, giving them space for this first father-son ritual. Through the open door, she could hear Everett's deep voice bringing the story to life, the boys occasionally interrupting with questions or observations that he answered with patient attention. By the time he emerged 30 minutes later, the boys were asleep, the day's excitement finally catching up with them. Everett closed their door quietly, his expression thoughtful. Thank you, he said simply, for this evening, for raising them so well. He hesitated, clearly struggling to articulate the complex emotions of the night. For everything. They've wanted to meet you for so long, Thea admitted. Every birthday, every Father's Day at school, every time they see their friends with their dads, they've wondered about you. I'll never forgive my mother for this, Everett said, his voice hardening. She stole 6 years from all of us. What will you do? Confront her. Tomorrow. His jaw tightened with determination. Then begin the process of restructuring my life to be the father they deserve. As he prepared to leave, standing at the apartment door, Everett seemed reluctant to go. When can I see them again? They have school tomorrow, and then karate after, Thea said, mentally reviewing their schedule. But they're free on Saturday. Maybe you could take them to the park or something simple. Start building a relationship before I start making promises or changes, Everett finished for her. I agree. One step at a time. He hesitated, then added, I'd like to help financially, Thea. Not to impose or control, but because they're my responsibility too. You shouldn't have to work 2 jobs just to make ends meet. Thea stiffened slightly. We've managed fine for 6 years. I know you have. That's not the point. Everett's expression was earnest, without the condescension she might have expected. This isn't about charity or guilt. It's about sharing the burden going forward. About making your life easier so you can pursue your own dreams too. The reference to her abandoned architectural ambitions caught her off guard. How did you know about? I remember, Thea. Everything. Your sketches, your sustainable housing designs, your dreams of creating spaces that serve communities instead of just looking impressive. His voice softened. Did you ever finish your degree? No, she admitted. There wasn't time, between the pregnancy and then 2 babies and work. I had to be practical. And now, if resources weren't an issue, Thea hesitated. For so long, survival had been her only focus. The luxury of dreams and ambitions had been set aside in favor of diapers and daycare and doctor's appointments. I don't know. It's been so long since I let myself think beyond next week's schedule or next month's rent. Think about it, Everett suggested gently. The boys deserve a mother who's fulfilled, not just surviving. After he left, Thea stood in her quiet apartment, the events of the day settling around her like falling leaves. So much had changed in 24 hours. The father of her children was back in their lives. The man she had once loved and lost was now a co-parent. The future she had carefully planned and managed had suddenly expanded into unknown territory. As she checked on the sleeping twins one last time before bed, she studied their peaceful faces in the glow of their nightlight. They had their father's chin, his eyes, his quick mind. But they had her heart, her resilience, her capacity for joy despite difficult circumstances. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was room in this new future for her own dreams to reawaken too. The next morning, Everett Carter stood in his mother's elegant sitting room, the evidence of her deception spread across the antique coffee table between them. Victoria Carter, still regal at 72, regarded the documents with an expression of cool disdain that did nothing to mask her discomfort. "Where did you get these?" she asked, her voice betraying only the slightest tremor. "Does it matter?" Everett's tone was glacial. "The voided check. The intercepted emails. The letter Thea sent that you made sure I never received. The birth certificates of my sons, your grandsons, that you knew about all along." Victoria's composure slipped slightly at the mention of grandsons. "You've seen them, then?" "Yesterday. For the first time. 6 years after they were born." Everett struggled to control his fury. "How could you, Mother? How could you keep my own children from me? I did what was necessary." Victoria straightened, her aristocratic bearing a defense mechanism honed over decades. "You were about to take control of the company. The board was watching for any sign of instability or scandal. A pregnancy with that girl would have derailed everything we'd worked for. That girl has a name. Thea, the mother of my children." Everett's voice was dangerously quiet. "And they're not just any children, Mother. They're brilliant, thoughtful, amazing boys who have been growing up without their father because of your manipulation." "You weren't ready for fatherhood," Victoria insisted. "Your career, your future. That wasn't your decision to make." Everett rarely raised his voice, but now it echoed through the elegant room. "You had no right to intercept her messages, to lie to her about me wanting her gone, to lie to me about her taking money to leave. I did what I thought was best for you. For the Carter legacy." The Carter legacy. Everett gave a bitter laugh. Is that what this was about? Preserving the precious family name? Making sure the next generation of Carters would be born into the right circumstances, to the right kind of mother? Victoria said nothing, but her silence was confirmation enough. "You know what's ironic, Mother? Those boys, those sons you tried to erase, they're more Carter than anyone I've ever met. Rowan has the analytical mind that built this company. Finn has the curiosity and drive that turned a small manufacturing business into a technology empire. They're the Carter legacy, whether you like it or not." "What do you intend to do?" Victoria asked after a long silence. "About them? I intend to be their father. To make up for 6 years of absence, whether they're living in a mansion or a modest apartment." "And about me?" Everett studied the woman who had raised him, who had shaped him into the successful businessman he had become, who had also stolen precious years with his children that he could never recover. "That depends on whether you can accept them, accept Thea, as part of my life, as part of our family. You can't seriously be considering rekindling a relationship with Thea." Victoria corrected herself at Everett's warning look. "She's not from our world, Everett. She doesn't understand our responsibilities, our position. She understands more about responsibility than anyone I've ever met, Everett countered. She's raised our sons alone, working 2 jobs, never taking a penny of the money you offered, never burdening them with bitterness about their absent father. She's given them values and strength and love that all your wealth and social position couldn't provide. Victoria fell silent, her expression unreadable. I'll give you time to consider your position, Everett continued, gathering the documents from the table. But understand this, those boys are my priority now. Not the company, not the Carter name, not your social standing. If you want to be part of my life going forward, you'll need to accept that. As he turned to leave, Victoria spoke again, her voice softer than before. What are they like? The boys. Everett paused, something like hope flickering briefly. Rowan is thoughtful, analytical, always observing before he speaks. He loves books and mathematics and asks questions that would challenge university professors. Finn is all energy and curiosity, taking things apart to see how they work, always in motion. They're both kind, resilient, and surprisingly well-adjusted despite growing up without half their family. They sound remarkable. They are. No thanks to us. Everett's tone hardened again. You have a choice to make, mother. Be their grandmother, a real grandmother who values them for who they are, not what they represent, or remain the woman who tried to erase their existence. I won't allow anything in between. With that, he left, the heavy door closing behind him with finality. In the car, he took a moment to compose himself before his next appointment. The confrontation with his mother had been necessary, but draining. Now he needed to focus on the future, specifically, the meeting he'd arranged with his corporate attorneys to discuss changes to his professional obligations and financial arrangements for the twins. Adjusting his schedule to be present for his sons wouldn't be simple. As CEO of a global technology company, his time was committed months in advance, board meetings, investor presentations, international conferences. But none of that mattered compared to building a relationship with Rowan and Finn. He would find a way, whatever it took. What surprised him most, as he directed his driver toward the office, was how often his thoughts returned not just to the twins, but to Thea. Her resilience, her quiet strength, her unwavering dedication to their children, all of it filled him with admiration and, if he was honest, with lingering feelings he had thought long buried. 6 years ago, he had believed she abandoned him for money. The truth, that she had walked away with nothing rather than accept what she saw as a bribe, spoke volumes about her character. And the life she had built for their sons, modest but filled with love and security, challenged everything he had been raised to value. Was there a future for them beyond co-parenting? The question lingered in his mind, impossible to dismiss, yet equally impossible to answer. For now, his focus needed to be on Rowan and Finn. Everything else, including his complicated feelings for their mother, would have to wait. Saturday morning found Thea watching from her apartment window as Everett's car pulled up outside. The boys were practically vibrating with excitement, dressed in their best play clothes for their first official outing with their father. They had talked of little else since his dinner visit, peppering her with questions about him, sharing theories about what they might do together. "Mom, he's here," Finn called unnecessarily, having stationed himself by the window 10 minutes before the appointed time. "And his car is really fancy. Remember what we talked about," Thea reminded them both. "It's not about fancy things or expensive presents. It's about getting to know each other." "We know, Mom," Rowan said with the patient tone of a child explaining something obvious. "Dad just wants to spend time with us." "Dad." The words sent a pang through Thea's heart. Joy that her sons could finally use the term, sadness for the years it had gone unspoken, and a complex mixture of emotions about the man himself. The knock at the door set both boys racing to answer it. Their earlier promise to act normal and not be too excited, clearly forgotten. Thea followed more sedately, bracing herself for the now familiar jolt of seeing Everett on her doorstep. He looked different today, more relaxed in casual clothes. His usual corporate polish softened into something more approachable. The smile he gave the twins as they greeted him was genuine, lighting his face in a way that reminded her of the man she had fallen in love with years ago. "Are you ready for our adventure?" he asked them, kneeling to their level as he had during their first meeting. "Yes," they chorused, already reaching for their jackets. "We'll be back by lunchtime," Everett told Thea, standing again. "Unless you'd like to join us?" There's plenty of room. The invitation caught her off guard. Oh, I thought you might want time alone with them. To bond. We'll have that too. But this is all new for them. Having you there might make them more comfortable. His expression was open, without ulterior motive. Plus, I could use the reinforcement. 2 6-year-olds are a bit daunting for a novice father. Put that way, how could she refuse? Let me get my coat. The adventure turned out to be a trip to the city's Natural Science Museum, a thoughtful choice that aligned with the boys' interests without being ostentatiously expensive or showy. As they explored exhibits on butterflies, for Finn, and space, for Rowan, Thea watched Everett's natural interaction with the twins with growing appreciation. He listened to their excited explanations with genuine interest. He answered their endless questions with patience. He knew when to offer information and when to let them discover things for themselves. For someone who had never been around children, his instincts were surprisingly good. Mom, Dad says there's a real planetarium show starting in 10 minutes. Can we go? Rowan's face was alight with excitement as he ran back from where he and Everett had been examining a moon rock display. Of course, if you think you can sit still for that long, Thea agreed, smiling at her usually serious son's enthusiasm. I can. I'll be super still. Right, Dad? Rowan looked up at Everett with such trust and admiration that Thea felt her heart constrict. Absolutely. Everett agreed, placing a gentle hand on Rowan's shoulder. You're the most focused 6-year-old I've ever met. The casual physical contact, the easy rapport, the natural use of Dad from a child who had never had a father figure, all of it felt like witnessing small miracles. Whatever else happened between her and Everett, this connection between father and sons was undeniably right. In the darkened planetarium, as stars wheeled overhead and Rowan whispered odd questions about galaxies and black holes, Thea found herself seated beside Everett, their arms occasionally brushing. Finn had fallen asleep against his father's other side, the excitement of the day finally catching up with him. Thank you for today, Everett said softly, his voice barely audible over the narrator's explanation of nebulae. For letting me into their lives. For raising them to be so incredible. They are pretty amazing, Thea agreed, watching Rowan's rapt expression as he stared upward. And they deserve to know you. Whatever happened between us, that's separate from what they need. Is it? Everett's question hung between them in the darkness. Can we really separate the past from the present so neatly? Before she could answer, the show ended and the lights gradually brightened. The moment passed as Finn woke up and immediately began asking questions about what he'd missed, but Everett's words lingered in Thea's mind long after they'd left the museum. The following weeks established a new rhythm to their lives. Everett became a regular presence, taking the boys for outings on weekends, attending Rowan's math club competitions and Finn's karate belt ceremonies, even rearranging board meetings to make school events. He never showed up empty-handed, but his gifts were thoughtful rather than extravagant, books that aligned with their interests, materials for projects they could work on together, experiences rather than possessions. To Thea's surprise, he respected her boundaries and parenting decisions, never undermining her authority or attempting to buy the boys' affection with excessive indulgences. When disagreements arose about screen time or bedtimes or appropriate activities, they discussed them privately, presenting a united front to the twins despite their different backgrounds and resources. Financial support came in practical, non-intrusive ways. Mysterious scholarships appeared for the boys' school, covering tuition and after-school activities. The building's superintendent suddenly found time to make long-overdue repairs to their apartment. When Thea's ancient car finally died beyond repair, a practical, if new, sedan appeared with a simple note, for the boys' safety. No strings attached. She accepted these gestures with cautious gratitude, recognizing them for what they were, Everett's attempt to improve their lives without overwhelming or controlling them. But she drew the line at personal gifts or support, maintaining her independence as she had for 6 years. I spoke with the admissions director at Westlake. Everett mentioned one evening as they sat on her small balcony, watching the twins play a board game inside. Their co-parenting discussions had become a weekly ritual, a time to align their approaches and address any concerns. They still have your application on file. You could finish your architectural degree in 2 years if you started this fall. Thea nearly choked on her tea. You did what? Just gathered information, Everett clarified quickly. No commitments, no arrangements. But the option is there, if you want it. Everett, I can't just go back to school. I have 2 jobs, 2 children, responsibilities. All of which could be managed with proper support. His expression was earnest, without a trace of the commanding CEO. You put your dreams on hold to raise our children alone. Now you don't have to do it alone anymore. I can't accept that kind of gift. It's not a gift, Thea. It's their father stepping up to share the load so their mother can fulfill her potential. His gaze was steady, challenging. Don't you want them to see you pursuing your passions, not just working yourself to exhaustion to provide for them? The question struck home with uncomfortable precision. How many times had she told the boys to follow their dreams, to never give up on their goals, while setting her own aside indefinitely? I'll think about it, she finally said, unwilling to commit but equally unwilling to dismiss the possibility outright. Everett nodded, accepting her non-answer without pushing further. That's all I ask. As autumn deepened toward winter, the tentative co-parenting arrangement solidified into something more substantial. The boys thrived with their father's presence, developing individual relationships with him that honored their distinct personalities. Rowan shared Everett's love of logic puzzles and strategic thinking. Finn found a kindred spirit in his father's engineering mindset and willingness to explore how things worked. For Thea, watching this bond develop was both healing and bittersweet. The anger she had carried for 6 years, believing Everett had abandoned their unborn children, gradually dissolved in the face of his genuine devotion to them now. Yet seeing the natural connection between father and sons only highlighted what they had all lost during those missing years. The twins' school winter showcase brought these complex emotions to the surface. Rowan was presenting his science project on constellations, while Finn had created a working model of a simple steam engine. Both boys had been practicing for weeks, excited to show their father their accomplishments. As Thea entered the crowded auditorium, she spotted Everett immediately, his tall figure standing out among the other parents. He had reserved seats for them in the front row, his expression brightening when he saw her approach. I was beginning to worry, he said as she sat beside him. The showcase starts in 5 minutes. Sorry, the bus was late, Thea explained, slightly out of breath from rushing. Did you see the boys backstage? Briefly. Rowan is calm as always, but Finn looks like he might explode from excitement. Everett's fond smile highlighted the changes these past weeks had wrought in him. The hard-driving CEO had softened, his priorities visibly shifting from corporate dominance to family connection. As the showcase began, Thea was acutely aware of Everett beside her, his presence both familiar and strange after so many years apart. When Rowan took the stage, confidently explaining his constellation project with precise detail, she felt Everett's hand briefly cover hers on the armrest between them, a spontaneous gesture of shared pride that sent an unexpected warmth through her. He's remarkable, Everett whispered, his eyes never leaving their son on stage. So articulate, so focused. Just like his father, Thea replied automatically, then felt heat rise to her cheeks as Everett turned to her with surprise. Before he could respond, Finn bounded onto the stage for his presentation, his enthusiasm practically radiating as he demonstrated his steam engine model. When a technical issue briefly threatened to derail his presentation, Finn solved the problem with quick thinking and improvisation, earning appreciative laughter from the audience. And that, Everett said softly, is all his mother. Your resilience, your ability to adapt and overcome. They've inherited the best of both of us. The simple observation, offered without pretense, crystallized something Thea had been feeling but couldn't articulate. These boys were indeed the best of both of them. Everett's intelligence and drive combined with her creativity and perseverance. Neither parent could claim full credit for who they were becoming, just as neither could have raised them perfectly alone. After the showcase, as they joined the twins for the reception in the school cafeteria, Thea watched Everett interact with other parents and teachers. He moved through the room with his usual confidence, but without the arrogance she might have expected, genuinely interested in the community his sons were part of rather than viewing it as beneath him. Ms. Winters, Mrs. Abernathy approached, her elderly eyes twinkling with curiosity. You didn't tell me the boy's father was back in the picture. And such a charming man. It's recent, Thea explained, unsure how to characterize the complex situation. The boys are getting to know him. Well, he clearly adores them. And them him. The older woman patted Thea's arm knowingly. Second chances are rare in this life, dear. Don't let pride stand in the way of happiness. Before Thea could respond to this unsolicited advice, Everett returned with the twins, both boys chattering excitedly about the praise they'd received for their projects. Dad's taking us for ice cream to celebrate, Finn announced, bouncing on his toes. You're coming too, right, Mom? Of course she is, Everett answered before Thea could speak. This is a family celebration. Family. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning and possibility. Not just co-parents sharing responsibilities, but something more cohesive, more interconnected. Something Thea had never dared to imagine after all that had happened. At the ice cream parlor, as the boys debated the merits of different flavors and toppings, Everett drew Thea slightly aside. I have something to ask you, he said, his expression uncharacteristically nervous. The boys mentioned wanting to see where I live. I thought maybe, this weekend, if you're comfortable with it, they could stay overnight at my place. With you, he added quickly. I have plenty of room. They'd have their own space, and so would you. The invitation represented a significant shift in their carefully structured arrangement. Until now, all interactions had happened on Thea's territory or in neutral public spaces, the careful boundaries of co-parenting without deeper entanglement. I don't know, Everett. Thea hesitated. That feels like a big step. It is, he acknowledged. But they're curious, and I think it might be good for them to see that part of my life, to understand where I come from without being intimidated by it. He had a point. The boys had been asking increasingly detailed questions about their father's home, his work, his life beyond the time he spent with them. Normalizing both parts of their heritage, Thea's modest, practical world and Everett's more privileged one, might help them integrate these disparate elements of their identity. All right, she agreed cautiously. But no extravagance, Everett. No excessive gifts or experiences that I can't possibly match. I don't want them developing unrealistic expectations. I understand. His relief was evident. Just a normal weekend. Well, as normal as possible. As normal as possible in a penthouse apartment that probably cost more than Thea would earn in 20 years. But she appreciated his intention, and the boys would be thrilled with this new adventure. The weekend visit revealed aspects of Everett that Thea hadn't expected. His penthouse, while undeniably luxurious, was more subdued and personal than she had anticipated. One bedroom had already been converted into a space for the twins, with practical furnishings suited to their interests rather than ostentatious displays of wealth. Another had been prepared for her, simple but comfortable, with a small vase of her favorite flowers, a detail from their past that he had somehow remembered. Most surprising was how he had incorporated the boys into his space before they even arrived. Photos of them from their recent outings were displayed alongside his limited personal mementos. Books and games suited to their interests filled shelves that had previously held business awards and corporate tributes. You've been planning this for a while, Thea observed as he showed her around while the twins explored their room with excited exclamations. Since the first time I met them, Everett admitted. I wanted them to have a place here, whether or not you ever agreed to let them visit. To know they belonged in my life, not just as occasional additions, but as permanent parts of it. The simple sincerity of his statement touched something in Thea that she had kept carefully guarded. This wasn't the calculating businessman making strategic moves. This was a father creating space in his life, his home, his heart for children he had only just discovered. That evening, as they shared a meal prepared by Everett himself, another surprise, as Thea had assumed he relied entirely on staff for domestic matters, she found herself relaxing into this new dynamic. The boys were animated but well-behaved, clearly understanding that this visit was important to their father. Everett was attentive without being overbearing, engaging them in conversation about their interests without dominating the interaction. After the twins were finally asleep, exhausted from the excitement of the day, Thea found herself sitting with Everett on his balcony overlooking the city lights. The setting was reminiscent of their early dating days, when he had been a rising executive and she a promising architectural student, before family expectations and misunderstandings had torn them apart. Thank you for today, Everett said, breaking the comfortable silence. For trusting me with them. With this step. They're happy, Thea acknowledged. You've done well by them these past weeks. I'm trying. His expression turned reflective. I keep thinking about all I missed. First words. First steps. First days of school. I can never get those moments back. No, Thea agreed softly. But you're here now. That matters to them. And to you. The question was tentative, unlike his usual confidence. Does it matter to you that I'm here now? Thea considered her answer carefully. It matters that they have their father. That they know you wanted them, once you knew they existed. The rest is complicated. Because you still don't trust me. Because I don't know if I can separate the past from the present. She echoed his words from the planetarium. 6 years of believing you chose your inheritance over our children. 6 years of anger and hurt and struggle. That doesn't just disappear because we now know your mother interfered. I understand that. Everett turned to face her directly. But I need you to know something, Thea. Even if my mother hadn't intercepted your messages, even if I had known about the pregnancy from the beginning, I might not have been ready then. The man I was 6 years ago was driven by ambition and family expectations. I might not have been the father they deserved. The honest self-assessment surprised her. And now I understand what matters. These past weeks with Rowan and Finn have shown me how empty my so-called success has been. All the corporate achievements, the wealth, the power, none of it compares to watching Finn figure out how something works or listening to Rowan explain a constellation. His sincerity was unmistakable, his transformation evident not just in his words, but in his actions since discovering the twins. The Everett she had known 6 years ago would never have prioritized a school showcase over a board meeting, never have spent hours helping with science projects, never have opened his home and his heart so completely to fatherhood. People can change, Thea acknowledged softly. I have. You have. Maybe that's how it needed to happen, apart, so we could become the people our sons need. Is that all we can be to each other now? Co-parents who respect each other's role in our children's lives. The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken possibilities. Thea looked out at the city lights, gathering her thoughts. I don't know, Everett. There's so much history, so much pain between us. And the boys are just getting used to having you in their lives. Complicating that with whatever might be between us seems risky. What if it's worth the risk? Everett's voice was low, intense. What if there's a chance for all of us to be the family the boys have wished for every birthday? Before Thea could respond, a small voice interrupted from the doorway. Mom? Dad? I had a bad dream. They turned to find Rowan standing there in his pajamas, his glasses slightly askew, his expression vulnerable in a way that tugged at both parents' hearts. Immediately, their personal conversation was set aside as they focused on their son's needs. Come here, buddy, Everett said, moving to make space between them on the outdoor sofa. Want to talk about it? As Rowan settled between them, recounting his nightmare with typical analytical detail, Thea was struck by how natural this felt. The three of them together, parents comforting their child, a family unit despite all the complications of their past and present. When Everett's arms stretched along the back of the sofa, his fingers lightly brushing her shoulder as he listened intently to Rowan's description, she didn't pull away. Some risks, perhaps, were worth taking. Not immediately, not without careful consideration of what it would mean for all of them. But the possibility existed now in a way it hadn't before. The possibility of healing, of second chances, of a future none of them had dared to imagine. As winter gave way to early spring, the tentative family unit they had established continued to evolve. The twins split their time between Thea's apartment and Everett's penthouse, finding different but equally important connections in both homes. At Thea's, they had the comfort of familiar routines, neighborhood friends, and the security of the only home they'd ever known. At Everett's, they had space to explore new interests, access to resources they'd never had before, and the undivided attention of a father eager to make up for lost time. Thea watched this evolution with mixed emotions, joy at seeing her sons thrive with their father's presence, concern about the growing disparity between what she and Everett could provide, and increasingly complicated feelings about Everett himself. The man he had become over these months was far from the cold, ambition-driven executive she had believed abandoned them. This Everett prioritized his children over corporate obligations, respected her authority as their mother, and supported her without trying to control her. When she had tentatively inquired about returning to school, he had offered practical solutions for childcare and scheduling without making her feel indebted or diminished. I've arranged my meetings to be free every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, he explained during one of their co-parenting discussions. I can pick the boys up from school those days if you want to schedule classes then. And Mrs. Abernathy has agreed to expand her availability for the evenings when we both have commitments. You've thought of everything, Thea observed, touched by his thoroughness. I want this to work, Thea. For all of us. His sincerity was unmistakable. The boys deserve a mother who's fulfilled by more than just survival. And you deserve to reclaim the dreams you set aside for them. It was this consistent support, this partnership without expectation, that gradually began to soften the walls Thea had built around her heart. Everett wasn't trying to buy her affection or manipulate her through the children. He was simply trying to be the father and co-parent they all needed him to be. The turning point came unexpectedly, during what should have been a routine weekend. Everett had taken the boys to the science center while Thea used the time to study for an upcoming exam in the architectural program she had finally enrolled in. When her phone rang with Everett's number, she answered with mild concern, assuming he had a question about the boys' schedule. Thea, his voice was tense, controlled in a way that immediately sent her anxiety spiking. Don't panic, but we're at Memorial Hospital. Finn had an accident at the science center. Her world narrowed to a pinpoint of fear. How bad? Broken arm. He fell from the climbing structure in the physics exhibit. He's in pain, but stable. They're taking him for x-rays now. I'm on my way. Thea was already grabbing her keys, heart pounding. How's Rowan? Scared for his brother. I've got him with me. Everett's voice softened slightly. Thea, I'm so sorry. I was right there, but it happened so fast. Kids fall, Everett. Just keep him calm until I get there. The 20-minute drive to the hospital was the longest of her life, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios despite Everett's assurance that Finn would be okay. When she arrived at the pediatric emergency department, she found Everett sitting with Rowan in the waiting area, both looking equally distraught. Mom. Rowan jumped up, running to her with tears in his eyes. Finn broke his arm. There was a really loud snap, and he screamed, and there was blood, and... Chill. It's okay, Thea soothed, kneeling to hug him while looking over his head at Everett. Where is he now? Still in X-ray. Everett said, his usual confidence absent. The doctor said it's a clean break, but they want to make sure there's no damage to the growth plate. He looked so genuinely distressed, so unlike the composed so she was accustomed to, that Thea found herself reaching out to squeeze his arm reassuringly. These things happen, Everett. He's an active boy. It won't be the last injury. I should have been watching more carefully. I was helping Rowan with the pulley exhibit and didn't see him climb to the top section. Self-recrimination was clear in his voice. Some father I'm turning out to be. A very human one, Thea corrected gently. Welcome to parenthood, where you can't prevent every accident no matter how vigilant you are. Before Everett could respond, a nurse appeared to guide them to Finn, who was now in a treatment room waiting for the orthopedic specialist. Despite his pale face and obvious pain, Finn brightened when he saw his mother. Mom, look what happened. He held up his obviously broken arm with a strange mixture of pain and pride. The doctor said I might need surgery, like a real scientist experiment. Oh, my brave boy, Thea said, carefully hugging him while avoiding his injured arm. Let's hope you don't need surgery, but if you do, you'll have the best doctors taking care of you. As the next few hours unfolded, the orthopedic consult, the decision that surgery wasn't necessary, the casting process, Thea found herself working in perfect synchronization with Everett. He asked the detailed medical questions she was too emotionally overwhelmed to formulate. She provided the comfort and reassurance that came naturally after years of mothering. Together, they created a supportive environment that kept both twins calm through what could have been a traumatic experience. By the time they left the hospital, Finn sporting a bright blue cast that he couldn't wait to have his classmates sign, something fundamental had shifted in Thea's perception of Everett. His vulnerability in the face of their child's injury, his willingness to acknowledge his limitations as a parent, his partnership without ego or control, all of it revealed a man far removed from the one who had broken her heart years before. Would you mind if we all stayed at my place tonight? Everett asked as they headed to his car, which was larger and more comfortable for Finn's return trip. The guest room is already set up for you. and I think Finn might be more comfortable there than trying to navigate the stairs at your apartment. The suggestion was practical rather than presumptuous, focused on Finn's needs rather than any agenda of his own. Still, it represented another step in their evolving relationship, not just co-parenting in defined, separated spaces, but coming together as a family unit in a crisis. That makes sense, Thea agreed, helping Finn into the back seat where Rowan was already creating a nest of pillows for his injured twin. I'll need to grab a few things from home first. That night, after both boys were finally asleep, Finn medicated and comfortable, Rowan curled protectively beside his brother in the room they shared at Everett's. Thea found herself accepting a glass of wine from Everett in his living room. The stress of the day had left them both emotionally drained but oddly connected, partners in the unique crucible of parenting. "Thank you," Everett said quietly, sitting across from her with his own glass. "For not blaming me. For knowing exactly what they both needed today. That's what parents do," Thea replied simply. "Support each other for the children's sake. Is that all we're doing?" The question was gentle but direct. Supporting each other for the children's sake? Thea studied him over the rim of her glass, considering her answer carefully. "I don't know, Everett. 6 months ago, I would have said yes, absolutely. That's all we could ever be to each other, co-parents with a complicated past. And now, she hesitated, the events of the day having stripped away some of her carefully maintained defenses. Now I'm not so sure. You're not the man I thought you were. Not the man who abandoned us, because that man never existed. And not the man I knew before, either. You're someone new. Someone I'm still getting to know. I feel the same way about you," Everett admitted. "The Thea I'm coming to know now is stronger, more defined by her own choices rather than by others' expectations. More confident in who she is and what she wants. Motherhood does that," Thea said with a small smile. "Nothing clarifies your priorities like being responsible for small humans. So does losing everything that matters and having to rebuild." Everett's expression was earnest, open in a way she had rarely seen during their previous relationship. "When I thought you'd taken the money and disappeared, it shattered something in me. Made me question everything I thought I knew about connection, about love. And now? What do you know now? That real connection isn't about status or expectations or family legacy. It's about choosing each other, day after day, through broken arms and school showcases and everyday moments." He set down his glass, leaning forward intently. "I choose you, Thea, not just as the mother of my children, but as the woman I want to build a future with, if you'll have me." The declaration hung between them, honest and vulnerable in a way their first relationship had never been. This wasn't the whirlwind romance of their youth, built on attraction and potential. This was something more grounded, more tested, more real. "I can't answer that tonight," Thea said finally. "Not with everything that's happened today, not with so much still uncertain between us. But I'm open to the possibility in a way I wouldn't have believed possible 6 months ago." Everett nodded, accepting her caution without pushing for more. "That's all I can ask for. The chance to show you who I am now, who we could be together." As she headed to the guest room later, Thea paused at the boys' doorway, watching them sleep. Finn's cast rested on a pillow, his face peaceful now that the pain medication had taken effect. Rowan's arm was thrown protectively across his twin, their bond as strong as ever despite the new dimensions of their family life. These boys had wished for their father every birthday for years. Now he was here, not just participating in their lives, but fully committed to being the parent they deserved. And perhaps, in time, he might also be the partner she had once believed he could be, not the man who had hurt her, but the one who had grown from that experience into someone worthy of a second chance. Some wishes, it seemed, took longer than others to come true. But when they did, they often arrived in forms far better than originally imagined. 3 months later, as the twins celebrated their half-birthday with a small party that incorporated elements from both their parents' worlds, Thea watched Everett helping them build an elaborate cake shaped like a butterfly, for Finn, with constellation patterns, for Rowan. His patient attention to their excited instructions, his willingness to get frosting on his once immaculate clothes, his genuine joy in their happiness, all of it confirmed what she had been gradually accepting over these months of rebuilt connection. This man, this family they were creating together, was where she belonged. Not because of obligation or convenience or the children's needs alone, but because the relationship they had rebuilt was stronger, more honest, more equal than what they had lost years before. "Mom, come help with the stars," Rowan called, waving her over to the kitchen counter where their masterpiece was taking shape. "Dad's making the butterfly wings all wrong." "I'm following the design exactly," Everett protested with mock offense. "Your artistic vision is just too advanced for my limited skills." "That's because you're a businessman, not an artist," Finn explained matter-of-factly, patting his father's arm with blue frosting-covered fingers. "But you're getting better." "High praise indeed," Everett laughed, catching Thea's eye over the boys' heads with a warmth that made her heart flutter despite herself. As she joined them at the counter, seamlessly stepping in to help with the more detailed decorations, Thea felt the rightness of this moment. This wasn't the family she had imagined when she discovered her pregnancy 6 years ago. It wasn't the life she had planned when she'd walked away from Victoria Carter's offer with her dignity intact, but her heart broken. It was something better. Something built on truth and forgiveness rather than misunderstanding and deception. Something created through conscious choice rather than expectation or obligation. Later that evening, after the cake had been consumed, presents opened, and twins finally tucked into bed in the room that was now permanently theirs at Everett's penthouse, Thea found herself on the balcony where they had first begun to reconnect months before. Everett joined her, bringing mugs of tea instead of wine, a small but telling shift in their evolving relationship. "Happy half-birthday to us too," he said, handing her a mug. 6 months since that day at Sweet Cakes Cafe. Since everything changed. For the better, Thea acknowledged, accepting both the tea and the sentiment behind it. "Though I'm not sure I would have believed that in those first days." "Nor I." Everett's smile was reflective. "I was so angry at first. At my mother, at you, at all the lost time. But now I wonder if we needed those years apart to become the people who could make this work. The people who could raise those amazing boys," Thea agreed. "The people who could choose each other for the right reasons." "And have you?" Everett asked, the question gentle but direct. "Chosen me? Chosen us?" Thea set down her mug, turning to face him fully. "I have. Not because of the boys, though they're certainly part of it. Not because of practicality or circumstances or any external factor. But because the man you've become is someone I can trust. Someone I can build a future with. Someone I love." The declaration, simple but profound, bridged the final gap between their painful past and hopeful present. When Everett reached for her, drawing her into an embrace that felt like coming home after a long journey, Thea went willingly, without reservation or fear. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I think I always have, even when I didn't understand what that meant. Even when I thought I'd lost you forever." As their lips met in a kiss that held promise rather than goodbye, Thea felt the final pieces of their story falling into place. The cold contract that had once defined their relationship had been replaced by something warmer, truer, more resilient. The abandoned hearts had found their way back to each other, guided by the innocent wishes of children who had never stopped believing their family could be whole. And in the end, that was worth more than all the wealth in the world, more than social position or corporate success or family legacy. It was worth everything. If you've been touched by this story of misunderstandings, second chances, and family reunited, hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional journeys. Have you ever experienced a moment where what seemed like a devastating loss eventually led to something better? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to turn on notifications for more content from Lux Love Chronicles with Mr. Wentworth. Remember, sometimes our greatest blessings come in unexpected packages, and the families we build are shaped not just by circumstance, but by choice, forgiveness, and love that persists even through the darkest times.